Daniel, and my technology research was done using Kahoot. My class had never used Kahoot before, and I implemented it as a study method for my students. They have weekly to bi-weekly tests depending on how much material we're covering, and we do a little wrap-up review kind of thing the day before every test. So instead of doing just a didactic stand in front of the room, question back and forth review, I started using Kahoot, and we used it for about 9 weeks in the classroom, and then we actually just recently used it for TCAP review, which the kids thought was awesome. And I found it to be very effective for morale in my classroom. My test scores didn't necessarily improve. There was a slight improvement, but it wasn't significant by any means. And it could have just been content area. I mean, there are lots of things that could have influenced the test grades besides the Kahoot, study method. But my kids really loved it. They looked forward to it, and it became a great behavior management tool in my classroom. So I was able to say, well, we aren't going to be able to do the Kahoot if you can't, X, Y, and Z. And it was definitely a positive learning experience for them. So even if they were getting questions wrong, they weren't feeling necessarily discouraged. They were just more motivated to study for their next test, or at least that's the feedback that I got from them. They also loved coming to class on Thursdays when they knew that we had tests on Fridays, because they knew that they were going to get to play Kahoot. So that was great. So on the student end, that's how that went. For me, as a teacher, it was actually incredibly awesome. When you stand in front of a class and you just ask basic review questions back and forth, you hear from 4 or 5 students, maybe. Sometimes 10 if you're lucky, but definitely not the whole class. And with the Kahoot system, I was able to immediately have results and see what my classes were getting really well, what they were missing, even down to had I worded my questions well for them, if there was a concept that I knew that they knew, but maybe I asked a question in a confusing way. And being able to immediately download those results and then use those to know where to go. That was really, really beneficial for me, and I think for my students as well. I found myself completely changing lesson plans where I wouldn't have before, and definitely found myself, there were a couple times that I actually held off for a day or two on our test after looking at the Kahoot results, because I realized that I thought my kids were ready, but they weren't as ready as I had thought that they were. The 2 or 3 that I heard from on a regular basis were ready, but everybody else needed a little bit more help in certain areas. So I found it to be a very, very effective tool for feedback, and as a formative assessment that helped inform my teaching and my lesson planning.